topic, everyone is like, oh, okay, this is what I don't understand, and the others help to clarify in case of anything, and then yeah, we proceed to the next.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, everything was I understood everything. It seemed pretty straightforward, at least for me. Um, and I even tested some stuff here and there.
Oh, that's awesome.
But I think, it's just gonna be doing it, right? The more I kind of, do these things kind of in the wild,
Yeah,
as the author likes to say.
yeah,
Um, getting used to the different syntax that I'm used to, because I do a lot of C# programming. So, you know, even just reading it and is kind of difficult, not seeing like the parentheses and like that sort of stuff. Um, so, I think it's just a process.
yeah, yeah. So could you take us through about some of the things you tested, if that's fine? We
Um,
talked about testing a couple of things here and there.
Yeah, I just kind of just getting used to not using parentheses for certain things.
Oh,
Creating a method without parentheses. Um, Doing some of the commenting, making sure that I'm commenting on, on some of the, or I guess on all of the um classes that I'm creating, right?
okay.
So I'm kind of just messing around making a basic application. And I'm using Ruby on Rails and using a Rubocop, which is um, you know a style syntax
Yeah, format.
formatter, and just making sure that I'm commenting on everything, and trying to do things, I guess, the Ruby way, making things like making sure like the methods are small, and that things seem to be like readable and simple, kind of it seems like a very, very much like a microservice kind of architecture. So just kind of doing that, making, CRUD kind of operations for a controller and kind of just doing it super basic, right?
Yeah.
But um but then it makes it nice, to kind of look at and to read. Definitely the parentheses is something that it takes used to getting, takes a little bit used to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think he talked about it in the book about guys that are coming from the C background and how it'll take some time to get used to it. Yeah,
Right, for sure. Yeah,
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 I
yeah.
definitely noticed that.
Mm. So, unlike you, I didn't, there are some things I didn't quite understand, especially this thing about the tab. I don't know if you've encountered that in the wild, that thing whereby they're not agreeing whether to use the tab or whether to use the space key.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, I don't know if you've encountered that in the world. You could share some insight about that.
Yeah, I mean, so I think first starting off programming, right? I've been programming for, over 10 years. It was always just a tab that you used. But I know that there has been the debate whether to use the tab or the space. I mean,
Yeah.
and I understand, I have my tab set so that when I hit tab, it just does two spaces.
Oh, how did you set that? Are you
It's
on Linux?
it's an option you can do in VS Code.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So I still hit tab and it's just two spaces, right? And so it's the same at the end of the day, it's the same. I think it's kind of a waste of time to hit space twice, you know? Um,
Yeah.
and I I do think that it's readable with the two spaces, and I'm fine with that.
So
I
you agree with author? You
what
agree with him on that?
I do agree, although
Okay.
I was trying to do it with HTML. Um, like making a web page, like, and I had a lot harder time being able to kind of parse the the information, or the HTML with two spaces, and so I went back to four spaces to doing just regular tab.
Okay.
So I think for Ruby, for coding, I think it's fine, but for like stuff like HTML, when there's lots of XML kind of formatting, at least for me, the four spaces made it, the larger indentation made it easier to read.
So you'd rather use tab instead for those cases.
Yeah, for
Mm.
HTML stuff, yeah, and XML, it makes it easier for me at least.
Okay. So personally, it was the first time I read about this tab thing, and I was
Uh,
like, whoa. So because all this time I was using tab, like I just
right,
indent with the tab key,
right.
and then the author is all like, you press the space bar and then twice and then four times and then like the
Yeah.
chain continues evenly. So it was like a very new thing to me.
Yeah, I would recommend if you use VS Code, just to set your tab to two spaces.
Mm.
It makes it easier, and you don't have to like
Okay.
hit the space bar. Uh,
Okay.
you know, there's a show called Silicon Valley.
Oh,
Um,
I love that show.
okay, so in one of the episodes, there is there's a running joke where the guy ends up breaking up with his girlfriend because she uses two spaces and he uses tabs.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, I know that it's like a running debate on whether which one to use, and I think
Mm.
for it's for different use cases, it's fine to use one or the other, and I guess it's preference too.
Mm.
Um, and I think I understand with the simplicity that Ruby wants to make things a little more sleek, right?
Yeah.
Having large tabs can make your lines very long. So I get it, and I'm fine with that, and I'm on board with it. So
Mm. Yeah. Okay. That has clarified a couple of things on my end. And then what did you think about the comments?
the what?
The commenting section when the author says instead of over commenting the code, it's better for you to consider refactoring the code. Because according to him, it's like it's poorly written, so it's better for you to refactor instead of
Uh-huh. I
commenting.
I was like, yeah, you're probably right.
Mm.
I definitely have remembered some things where I've commented, on things. Okay, like this is what this line of code is doing, and looking back, it's like, yeah, I probably should have just refactored that whole thing, and I had been wanting to refactor it.
Yeah.
So that makes sense to me, and I think, in some cases though, it's fine to just put the comment, and in other cases, right, it's better to refactor. Um, what did you think about it?
Okay, given my current level, I'm a junior, so I can't really I don't really have that experience to determine whether this is fit for refactoring or
Uh,
this is fit to stay.
yeah,
Of course, there are some sections when you look at the code and it's very complex, so it could be broken down. But then in
yeah,
other contexts, it's like you can't tell.
right, sure.
Mm.
Yeah, I mean, I think at least for me, you know, it's when it's too complex, and even I need to like read it my own code to figure out what I'm doing, then it's like, okay, that's probably a sign. And then at least for me, there's other times where like I will just can't stop thinking about why I should have done it a different way. And I think a lot of times, at least for me when I've been programming, when you first start, you don't necessarily know which is going to be the right path. And so you just start working down one way, and that's fine,
Mm. Yeah.
you know. And but at a certain point, at least for me, once I start going through it, and I'm starting, okay, this is starting to become overly complex. Maybe I should have gone and done it the other way. Now that I've gone down this route, I know that why I shouldn't have gone down this way and why now the other way is going to make more sense.
Mm,
So
mm,
sometimes it's better to just, cut your losses instead of keep forging down the same path.
mm.
At least for me, it's like, and and I guess it just depends case to case, at least for me. Um, whether or not I need to like cut my losses and start over, or just keep going down the same path.
Okay. So would you agree if I said that such thinking about code comes with experience?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm, mm,
Absolutely. But I think at the same time though too, at the beginning, eh, when I'm working with the group, right, there may be, and we're coming up with a way to figure something out. Um, right, there may be three or four different ideas of how we could do it. And so, right, you try to figure out which one makes the most sense at the time, um, between everyone's experience, but that's not always the case. And so, sometimes, having a good planning session too at the
uh,
beginning, to really try to figure out how you're going to create whatever it is you're going to create. Um, especially when there's multiple projects, that you're working with. Um,
yeah, so another thing I wanted to put across is that when you're starting out, you tend to chase this high of just solving the error. So you just make sure the code works. You don't follow
uh-huh.
best practices. You just it
Yeah,
works, you proceed to the next thing like that, like that. Yeah.
yeah, for
Mm,
sure.
yeah.
Definitely.
Mm,
Definitely, and I've noticed the more that I've like been programming, or at least now that I'm learning this new language, I'm noticing now it's like, okay, I did get it to work, but there is something here that I wanted to fix, that I see, and so it's like, do I just keep going forward, or do I go and like try to make it like as nice and organized as possible? And I'm finding more and more, um, that I'm wanting to like keep working on the same thing and making it nicer rather than kind of just moving forward, because I know
mm,
like, this I'm just messing around making some silly application, with Ruby on Rails, and I know that if I don't organize stuff now, that it's going to be so much harder to go back and organize it later. It's
mm.
just going to set me up for, to make things easier down the road. And so it's worth it, At least that's what I've, started to find, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, very true. And another thing I realized, so recently I started contributing to open source and
Okay.
it dawned on me that features actually take like a very long time to implement. Like you work on the code and then they review it and then it's refactored and then you refactor and then they run the tests. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it doesn't all have to just kind of, work and be great on the first try.
Yeah, yeah. So
Did
Nelson,
you?
Yeah.
oh,
Um,
we're talking about the comment section. I don't know if there's anything you'd want to add on that, the commenting part of the book.
well, let me add to this conversation first, because I found that you know, there there are different stages in your programming journey. When you're just starting out, you're just trying to learn the syntax, and then you're just trying to make it work, and then you learn about other things, other techniques like design patterns, or clean code, or these other things that you learn about on the way. And when you first learn about design patterns, like, oh, you have a hammer, everything is a nail, right? And you start trying to create a factory builder pattern, or all these different ways of organizing the code, and you imagine that okay, like I can prepare for any eventuality. If I just organize the code in a certain way, I'm going to have this idea where in the future, I'm going to be able to react and respond to all the new features that come down the pipe. But the seniors that I've worked with um, have let me know that that's not the case. That's not what happens. You know, you if when you try because what you're doing is you're trying to predict the future. And when you spend a lot of time organizing the code into different patterns, what you're doing is you're saying, okay, I'm going to create abstraction here. Um, instead of keeping the code simple, we're going to break apart this code into different sections. But it's hard to know if the way that you've broken apart the code is actually good for the future because no one can predict the future. And sometimes, you're hit with different features where they say, okay, all that hard work that you spent doing this, well, we don't need that feature anymore. We're going to take it out because it doesn't work and it is costing us money. Uh,
Mhm.
or this other feature, we expected it to work in this way, and you designed it to work in this way, but we've changed our minds. And so all that time you spent preparing for the future is sort of wasted. Um, and so the seniors that I worked with basically uh, said, do as minimal as you can, make it as readable as you can, but do no more. Like if you're trying to put in safeguards for the future, it never works out. And so that was that part of that conversation. And then in the beginning, Kyle mentioned that he came in from C sharp, and that is a little bit hard to read Ruby at first because you don't see the parentheses, and I had the same problem because I came from Java, and what's really hard is distinguishing, like, is this a variable or is this a function call? What's going on here? Because there's no
Right.
parentheses here to indicate
Yeah. Yeah.
that difference. And what I would say to that is that even if you are speaking a language, let's say you're going from English to Spanish, you're you're gonna have a, a, a sorry, no, no babies. Ahorita no. Sorry, it was my babies here. Uh,
Mhm.
you're gonna have an accent in whatever language you came from, and that accent is gonna lead you to have some expectations about the way you read the code or the way you understand the code, and it takes a little while to develop that inner compiler in your brain to be able to uh, look at a piece of code and like understand immediately what it does. But when you do, all of a sudden, Ruby, I think, becomes easier to read because when you don't have these parentheses, there's fewer things for your brain to parse. And instead of reading code, you're reading phrases, you're reading pseudocode, um, which to me is easier to understand. Sorry, it's a long,
See,
long conversation.
No, it's fine. Yeah.
Um, I sorry, I'm taking care of my kid. I gotta step out. I'll be right back.
no
Okay.
worries.
Mm. So I think so should we proceed to another part? I think we've covered the parentheses bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gonna ask you like maybe about chapter two stuff. You know what you thought about the unless and the until.
Oh, unless okay. So part of the reason as to why I find unless confusing is because English is not my first language.
Sure.
Yeah. So I know that unless means if not, but then there are cases when you find like a double negative, if not, not, and then that is like very difficult to use the unless.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So to me, it's like it seems it's supposed to be very, very readable and understandable when
Uh-huh.
someone says, unless condition, do this. But
Right.
to me, it takes like a lot of it taxes me a lot mentally to understand.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I'm for sure the same way. I'm kind of excited to use it though.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. You do it with the note and
hmm
yeah. But I think that is the issue. And then another thing, I think he talked about unless being like a negative an equivalent of if not.
Uh-huh.
And then he talks about until
Uh-huh.
being a negative equivalent of while.
Right.
An equivalent of negative while, sorry.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I think he highlighted that. And then he attached bits of code. And then there's a certain condition here. He's like, while non-document is printed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can see that. While
Yeah, I'm on that
non-document
page.
is, yeah. And then it ends with a question mark, which means it's evaluating to a Boolean.
Right.
And then he says, document don't print next page.
Right.
Yeah, and then he says instead of using this with the bang, I don't know if the exclamation,
Yeah.
you use until instead.
Right.
So I think you're looping and you're trying to see until the entire document is printed.
Right.
Yeah. So if the entire document is printed, that means you don't have any more pages to print.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So in this case, I see that the until creates a bit of more conciseness to the code and it's understandable, but it takes time. At least for me, it will take
Yeah.
time. Yeah, it will take time.
Yeah, I think like Nelson was saying, it does look a little bit more like pseudocode. And
Mm.
yeah, I can see how it, once you get used to it, it will be easier to kind of read and to understand.
Yeah, yeah,
But I definitely feel the learning curve trying to do
yeah.
stuff, you know.
It's,
Yeah, I definitely have been like following like tutorials and stuff and just been like, I'm so lost.
mm,
But but it's going well. I think it's just a process. So
yeah, yeah. And then I don't know what are your thoughts about what your thoughts are about he talks about whether you should there are conditions whereby you're going to have code that is better written on the same line being written on two lines. So you have to refactor and bring the code to one line. I don't know if
yeah,
what are your thoughts about that?
um, I don't know. I think I will wait to see if other people do it before I start doing it.
Oh, he attached a couple examples, but I
I
don't know.
saw the examples, yeah.
Yeah,
And it
yeah,
make the examples make sense,
yeah,
and
yeah, will do.
I would understand it if I read it.
Yeah.
I just I just have it so ingrained that I would never do it on my own. And so until I see other people like, doing it, I'm gonna hold off on that.
It
What do
feels
you
like it feels very, very innate to me, like inbuilt for me to use two lines instead of a single line.
Right.
Especially for conditions, you have a condition and you're like, if the condition is meant, do this.
Yeah.
So for that it's like very, very, very hard for me to change that, I think.
I've I've done it sometimes like on JavaScript.
Yeah.
I've done it before, but again, it's very rare. More often for me, it would be like if it's just a single line of code, right? If something happens, then return. Um, I won't necessarily put it on the same line, but I won't use the curly braces. Um, so I've used that sort of, skipping the curly braces when there's only one thing. Um, and yeah, I think it, I'm fine to do it, and it seems, I've done it before. But yeah, it's something that's will be hard to do on the regular.
Yeah. So what do you think about the comparison between each and for when you're looping through, like, let's say, an array of values?
Yeah, I use the for each loop more than when if I'm using an array. I think it's
Mm.
much easier to understand. And you?
Or you use for or you use each?
Well, so in in C sharp, it's called a for each loop, so that's why I said it that way.
Oh,
Um,
oh,
so I
okay.
use I yeah, so I use it's but basically it's the each, right? It's
Mm.
and I prefer that. It makes it easier to understand.
Yeah. So I think he brings in the case after the case statement.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to replace the multiple if else and else
Right.
ifs. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Um,
I also use the case statements often. I did find it interesting some of the things that you can do with the case statement that I haven't been able to do before, like setting the equivalent.
oh
Um,
yeah, that was a new thing to me as well.
yeah, so that looks like it could be handy because a lot of times you are trying to do something like that when you do a case statement, right?
Yeah.
And so I found that it could be handy. I am interested to know, you know, what the case would be when you want to do the equivalent, but you also want to do maybe one or two other things. Um, and so yeah, I'd be interested to see what people do in that case.
Mm.
Because I mean I like it. I would definitely use that, and have definitely been in that scenario before. So
Mm. Okay. So what about the method naming, class definitions, constants?
um
I don't know what you think about that.
like using camel case and stuff.
Yeah, snake case.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
Mm.
I am not really I don't really have a preference one way or the other as long as right, because in C sharp I think there's not always it's not as clearly defined. It's not like everybody in the language does this or everybody in the language does that. So, a lot of times we have to decide what it is we want to do. And so I usually don't care as long as we make a decision on what it is that we're doing. And so I appreciate that the decision's already been made, like this is the standard and this is what you should do.
Mm.
And so I'm fine to adhere to that, and it's it's fine.
Okay.
um I think in
So,
C sharp it's normally snake case, so this is different.
mm,
Or I mean it's normally a camel case, but
mm.
so it'll just be something that I'll have to get used to, but it's not a big deal.
Okay, so in the first meeting, there was an issue that came up, and there was a bit of confusion about the importance of when you have an exclamation mark at the end of the method and what
Uh-huh.
that means.
Right.
Yeah. And then uh, and then the comparison between such a method and a method that has a question mark at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so there was a kind of a bit of a confusion, and personally, I thought the exclamation mark shows that this method is capable of performing a dangerous action, which
Right.
usually involves changing something. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a bit of confusion. So, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good idea. And yeah, I think I understood it fine. Yeah, like, yeah, this is maybe a dangerous action or something that is perhaps unusual. Um, and I think it's fine to denote that. I don't think I would have the wherewithal to know when I should do it for a method that I'm creating myself. But um, I, I understand the importance of it for sure.
Mm. So to you, it wasn't confusing.
No, I mean, I read it a few times.
Mm.
I read over kind of that a few times and say, okay, it's for when the output is something that you may not necessarily expect, or
Yeah,
when, like you said, something's dangerous. You're changing you know, the string in the method to something else, right?
yeah. Mm.
So that makes sense, and that's fine. To denote that this is an action that's could potentially have consequences that you don't may not intend. So
So another thing that the author specifies is that okay, according to the book and according to the seniors and everyone, we have these rules regarding style in Ruby. But
uh-huh.
then at the same time, he says that you should use your own judgment when writing the code and know when to bend these rules or when to go against the rules. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I think you saw the example of the Ruby code itself, and it's
Right,
going
right.
against some of the rules.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
um I mean, I think it's kind of like just with everything, there's always exceptions to the rules,
Mhm.
and it'll just take time to understand,
Yeah. Yeah.
the nuances of understanding when, you know, the
When to break
other
the rules
coders,
and
the senior devs or whatever are
yeah.
doing this or doing that, or why they're doing this, or whatever. I think that's just something that comes with time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so,
So the meeting is about to end. It has like 2 minutes and 2 minutes left, roughly.
perfect. Yeah, this was great. I just wanted to thank you for setting this all up. I
Oh,
appreciate all of the work that you've done, and I'm super happy to, since I've been wanting to learn Ruby, and I kind of was just looking on Reddit, and I saw this, and I thought, okay, great, let's do it. And so I jumped on board,
mm.
and so yeah, this was great, exactly what I was looking for, and so I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you so much for joining. Yeah,
Yeah, of
is the
course.
book, is the writing concise? I found it to be very, very, very straightforward. Like,
Yeah, I
yeah.
I I find it to be very, very readable. It's
Mm.
easy to digest and look through, and it's a great book, a great choice. So,
Okay. So I don't know. Nelson is not yet back, but the meeting is about to end. It has like a minute, 30 seconds.
yep,
Yeah, I think.
that's fine. I think we can leave here, and we'll see you next week then. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, most definitely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, have a good day.
All right, you too. Bye.
So, yeah, bye. I'm going to end the meeting.
Yep.
Mm.